Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice.
Hey everybody, in this episode, we're going to go through a recent session that I did on the state of private practice. And coming fresh, literally just got home a day or two ago from our last Breakthrough boot camp here in Orlando just last weekend. And I went through this opening session. I think I've done this to some extent over the last 10 years. I think I've done it 25 times where I talk about the state of PT. You might have seen this on the virtual summit. The thing that's a little bit different this time is the amount of research that I was able to get in beforehand and really shed light on what's happening with the DPT shortage, what we can expect there, what's happening with finances, and also talked about updates in marketing and with systems. So in this episode, I'm going to go through those four pillars: marketing, finance, personnel or people, hiring, and also operations. So let's get started here. All right. So I opened up with, big picture, what are we really trying to do here? Yes, we're spending $14,500 per year per person here in the US on healthcare, and we're not in the top 20 in any major category. In fact, I think overall we're 69th in the world, even though we have the most expensive healthcare system, that we are 69th in the world when we look at all the metrics around health of a population of people. So not good. We're paying a lot and we're getting a pretty lousy result. So what's going on? If we look at where the money goes, it does not go to conservative care. So if you're in physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, chiropractic care, podiatry, dentistry, those seven are what CMS considers conservative care. And less than 10% of all healthcare money goes to those seven. And much of it goes to hospital systems, healthcare systems by way of medications, injections, surgery, diagnostic imaging. So, the goal is that we're flipping the healthcare pyramid. This isn't new. This isn't a political stance or anything like that. We believe that, affordable care, more effective healthcare system is the right thing to be building for future generations. So in that, we talk about, the key to doing this is looking at the four pillars. What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities that we have right now that we can mitigate through and navigate? So the first one that we're going to talk about is people, and that is, hiring. And my question for you as you're listening to this right now, how are you doing hiring? Are you losing team? Is team retention an issue where you have, PTs leaving, clinicians leaving, front desk leaving, going elsewhere? And, how's your team retention doing? Well, if you are in the physical therapy business, and in this event, I was speaking to a group of physical therapists. So in 2010, 32% of PTs were between the ages of 50 and 64. By 2019, it was up to 49%. Were between the ages of 50 and 64. And then today, that number has gone back down. So it's lower than it's been a while. It's 24%. So we did have an aging population of DPTs. That's no longer the case. In fact, it skews significantly younger. The projected annual shortage of PTs, DPTs through 2030 is roughly 18,000. And in 2024, so last year, we only graduated 12,149 DPTs. And the other issue is today, they're 5 times more likely to fail the national PT exam than in the past. So that's an issue as well. So we have this huge shortage. We're not graduating nearly enough. Many of the 50 to 64-year-olds in 2019 have now moved on. They're not even in the industry anymore. They retired, they closed their practice, etc. And we're much younger today, but we're not graduating enough. And, there's a regional differences in supply. This was prevalent in the APTA's report that they put out here in December. The 3 best states for supply and demand for DPTs are Pennsylvania, where I'm at here, New Jersey, and New York. The three worst states are California, Florida, and Texas. And that's primarily, from what I can tell, from what I can see online, that's primarily correlated to number of accredited programs per population of people. And the other thing that I didn't understand there was such a huge discrepancy is in accredited programs. I was just on with two head of departments last week. One program graduates 28 to 30. The other program is going to graduate over 165, right? So something else to consider there. I always used to just think if I counted accredited programs in a state, that's all I had to do. But there are actually major differences in the number of graduates that each program's putting out. Doesn't really solve our problem. And the other thing that I got into was, we have this bubble that will not pop primarily around education. And I know there's a lot in the news right now. Again, I'm going to reserve my political comments. That's not the purpose. I'm going to be as agnostic as possible here, as much as I can be. But there's this idea around, no longer do DPTs carry the professional nomenclature. And why is that a big deal? Well, it influences and directly affects the amount of money that is available for students going through a DPT program, the amount of money that they're allowed to borrow. So, and I went through a bit of the timeline and history, but there's this idea around the Bennett hypothesis, which is basically the more money that we allow students to borrow, the greater the cost of the degree becomes. And there's I believe they call it the rule of 64, which is basically every dollar increase that the government will allow students to borrow, their cost of education goes up 64 cents within 12 months. Some historic things that we talked about here, in general, increased lending, just as it does in the regular economy when we increased our credit facility, which is more money is allowed to be borrowed, prices go up. So what that has done for education over the last 25 years is roughly a 3x increase, and the prices have been hiked, but there's no drop in enrollment, right? So it hasn't really affected supply and demand as it typically does in a free market with no encumbrances or no subsidies at all. 93% of graduating DPTs carry debt today. The average is $142,000. And there is this financial paradox where salaries have not kept pace with the cost of the degree. So, if I look at when I was a freshman in college 30 years ago, and again, that the cost of the degree is more than 3x of what it is today. The starting salaries at that time were more than half of what they are today, right? So they haven't even 2x'd yet. And so pretty big disparity there, especially considering the additional debt load. And that's creating a lot of problems for us. We frequently talk with DPTs who want to work in our setting for our private practice, and they're really forced to take on something that pays more because of student debt. So they might choose a travel job, or they might have to go to the local hospital or healthcare system. The next pillar that we talked about were finances. And this is kind of fascinating because typically what I've done here is I show the physician fee schedule since 2008, even though I have full data back to 1994. And if there's one chart that I've ever produced, or infographic, or whatever you want to call it, that has been asked to be borrowed and used the most, it is this one. So, and what I've done in the graph, I show that since 2008 through 2026, I believe we've had 11 decreases in Medicare reimbursement. We've had 4 increases, but the net effect is more than a 15% decline in revenue for the same exact service. And that does not include the 15% PTA or quota reduction since 2008. So fairly devastating. On that same graph, so that's the revenue line. The other one that I show is the CPI, or the inflation index. And that has, so, one line, our reimbursements, our revenue have gradually declined, and then our costs to provide care have gradually increased. And this creates quite an issue, because the difference between those two lines, revenue and our expenses, what do we know that is? It's profitability, right? Or a margin of safety. And if that's decreasing rapidly and those lines cross, really what we're forced to do frequently is close our doors. So I know Scott Gardner at UPTA, they just put out this very helpful CPT code graphic showing, 2019, 2025, and 2026. So really it shows the only increase that we have during that time is the 97161, or the evaluation codes. Everything else is on a decline. The net effect of that, so the decrease in reimbursement since 2019, the increased cost because of inflation, the net effect of that is, well, what do you think that is, right? So providing the same exact service today versus in 2026 versus 2019, how much of a reduction do you think we have with inflation plus the decrease in reimbursement? So do you think it's 10%? That's the most common guess that I heard at this conference, the Breakthrough Conference, and also from other owners talking with them privately. So most guess 10% in the last 7 years. Do you think it's 20%? Do you think it could actually be 30%? The real answer is 29%. So we've taken a 29% hit, right? And that it's the frog in the boiling pot. The very first story, the analogy that we talked about at Breakthrough, back in 2013, it's that the frog in the boiling pot all over again. Like, we feel this pressure. We're not sure where it's coming from. We want to blame it on something. But in the end, inflation and decrease or static reimbursement rates are absolutely crushing us. So the other thing that came up here, I went through, I believe this came from our friend here, Ben Fung at UpDoc Media, but I was pulling other annual reports and referenced them. But, average reimbursement benchmarks right now, 3.8 units per visit, $3 per visit. I asked the conference, which was roughly 45 practices, how many of you are over 103? There was a handful of owners there. How many of you are less than 103? A lot more hands went up. Average outpatient salary currently is 94 to 98K. Most of the room was below that, although some were higher than that. The highest that was in the room was 135K for an outpatient PT salary, not a director. That's kind of wild. That was in California. Average new grad salary is 74 to 86K. Most of the room agreed with that. Average margin per license. This is a big deal. So I heard this. I got this from I was listening to dentists talk about this, how they calculate within their industry the margin per clinician and the margin per dentist. And I was like, I never really thought about that. And I went back and looked at our numbers. I believe it's about 50K. I've never heard another owner talk about that. If we have, in our case, I believe we have 36 full-time equivalent licenses. If we have 300, those numbers should typically scale and maybe get slightly better. But for us, it's, roughly 50K. And that kind of, we don't have an infinite amount of dollars to give raises to this time. I would love to pay every one of our DPTs, 135K. That isn't real. We would literally bankrupt our company, our partnership here overnight, and we don't want to do that. So I think that's something, you might want to look at that. If you have 4 DPTs and your profit margin is 240K a year, your number would be 60K. And then if you need to hire a PT, then you start thinking about, well, how much am I willing to invest to bring that PT on? Kind of a big deal. Right. The next thing that I went through is we started talking about cash pay services. And I'm going to, again, assume the thing that, when we, at the end of the event, when we asked attendees for wins and takeaways, the cash pay services and the hope on the other end of, solving that 29% hit that we've taken since 2019, adding cash pay services and doing it well was by far the number one win and takeaway that I heard people talking about the most. So I shared some numbers of our clinics and also the bit of a struggle that we've had in terms of rolling out cash pay services. Back in 2015 at an association event at Rose and Shingle Creek, I had started sharing that I thought there may come a day, I didn't think it would happen this fast, but quickly, that I believed that the core service of physical therapy, based on the trends of reimbursements and the increase in cost, that there may come a day where that's a break even at best, and we have to have cash pay services on the back end. Now, what's a cash pay service? It's laser, it's shockwave, it's NewFit or your newbie device, it's Run DNA and TPI running performance, golf performance analysis. It might be dry needling for you, massage, a stretch lab or equivalent or something like that, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, supplements, etc. It's one of those services that we have to have that are more profitable on the back end because we're not, we're breaking even on our core service that we're offering. So started talking about it then. We started adding in cash services in 2017, 2018 in our Harrisburg office, and then rolled it out to the other offices, but it was a slow go. And in 2023, this is laser only for us, we did $24,539. Not great. And that was for 3 units. So we were averaging less than $9,000 per year per unit. Just barely, $8,200 per year. Not great. In 2024, we did a little bit better. So we went up to $50,870 with those same 3 units. We doubled, more than doubled in a year within 12 months. And then in 2025, we did great. So we're up to $297,000 plus in the year 2025, and that was with 4 units, so roughly $75,000 a unit. And that's fantastic for us. And when we look at our margin of safety and providing a stable workplace and a stable place to provide treatment, we're much safer with that extra $300,000 than we are without it. The other thing that's happening is we have better outcomes, right? And there's, we notice some other things that people that buy a cash pay service in the beginning of their treatment plan, they're more likely to follow through and graduate their plan of care. So, we talked about this and, how to think through it and how to remedy. And I know many owners are thinking about when they buy like a treatment device, if I just break even on my monthly payment, I'm going to be fine because at the end of 5 years, I'm going to own this free and clear. There's a better way to be thinking about that. And I'll just give you the math on that. If you're aiming for 1,000 today, they're not only from our numbers, but from other owners, they're averaging up to $15,000 in revenue per month per treatment device. Much better game for you to play. Get that piece of equipment paid off right away so you can provide more service and create stability. And there are lots of ways to do that. The other thing that happened at the event around cash pay services is a lot of practices wanted to know, what was the difference for us? What really did it? And I had been talking with my group, for years, 10 years plus. And one of our partners and directors, Matt Conroy, who's been on the podcast here, has been on breakthrough webinars, etc. He said, who is doing the best in the country with cash pay services of anybody that that's in a PT practice that's similar to ours? And I said, it's Tony Sear. And he said, can you connect me? So this was a year ago in the beginning of 2025. And I sent a text to Tony and Matt introducing them. Tony scheduled a call immediately with Matt. It was an unreal favor that he did for us, and gave Matt an hour of his time and just said, hey, here's what we're doing. This is how we're rolling out. These are the pitfalls. This is how I would think about sequencing this as you're rolling it out. And Matt came back and spoke with our group and was absolutely, a champion for us. And the other, rough thing that we're seeing is when we go through those numbers I just shared, we're nearly $300,000 in laser sales in 2025. If we remove the top 6 of our clinicians who are introducing laser in their treatment plans to patients, that number gets anemic real quick. And I believe it's under 25K. So really, as you're rolling this out, there are some right and wrong ways to do that. And at the breakthrough event, we talked with, and owners were sharing, here's how I'm getting, other practitioners on board. This is what we're doing. So that was pretty cool to see. And I really think I view this more as an opportunity than a long-term struggle. That 29% is not, it's not healthy. We can't continue that for another 7 years without some sort of remedy on the back end. Our answer right now that I'm seeing in our practice, plus other owners that I'm talking with, are that back end cash pay service that not only improves the business math, but more importantly, helps the patient heal more quickly. The next pillar that we talked about were processes and systems. And the main thing that we focused on here were, EMR, your marketing software, which everybody in the room we're biased because everybody in the room is a breakthrough client at this event. But, thinking through, are we using an AI conversion agent? Are we using, any sort of technology advances to send emails and text campaigns to our patients? How do our marketing and our EMRs, how do they integrate right now? How does this influence what we're doing in billing? And is there anything that we should be improving upon with our processes and our systems? So we talked through that. No real update other than all the updates that you're aware of with your EMRs, with your marketing software, and also with RTM or any other systems and processes that you're using. And the fourth and final pillar here of private practice is your marketing. And this is, how you get found out and how you're growing. And we talked about this timeline of how much our industry has improved since 2015 over the last 10 years. Back in 2015, if you're a private practice PT, you weren't doing direct-to-consumer marketing. It wasn't there. Less than 10% of us had any initiative there at all. And there's a lot of confusion around, if my state doesn't have direct access, can I still market direct to the consumer? We were always allowed to market direct to the consumer. We just confused it with direct access. But we've made tremendous progress there as an industry in the last 10 years. Reactivations, not even talked about years ago. Today, it's a mainstay for many programs, for many practices that are sending monthly, weekly emails, text campaigns, direct mail for reactivations. We talked through the GPE and recheck days. And I know when we started teaching killer marketing back in 2015 and practices weren't doing reactivations, GPE was just a very simple way that they could market, get a quick win, have an influx of patients come in and mitigate their slow season. And we talked about today, that's evolved into recheck days, where when we discharge somebody, we set up a recheck for 3 to 6 months from today. We talked about, how the media selection has changed from direct mail and print to now social media with Meta, TikTok, Google, Instagram, etc. And how TikTok, kind of came and went, was a fairly quick flash in the pan. We talked about, the email plus text plus the AI conversion agent and how practices can automate. And simply put, those tools were not available. Writing an email campaign and sending it in 2015 was dramatically different and a lot more work than what it is today. And, the tools that we have at our disposal today allow us to keep in contact with our patient list forever for not a lot of effort. I mean, you've got to be trying. If you're not getting any reactivations, you have to be like actively trying not to market, not to communicate with your patient list. We talked about, the conversion conversations that are so important and how that was overlooked years ago, and how every practice knows today that you need to be paying attention to what your front desk is saying, to how your marketing team and your patient care coordinators are answering emails and text and any other way that your potential patients are communicating with your office, and all that we've learned from data centers, et cetera, over the last 10 years. And then finally, workshop presenting, which again, that was one of the first things we taught back in 2015. And now, there's a million people teaching how to do workshops, and many people doing them as well. So we talked through that. We talked about, the 3 ways to market cash pay services, only because, again, that's a hot topic: selling to present patients, promoting to your patient list, and then running paid ads specifically to those services, those cash pay services. And we shared statistics on that: what's working in paid, what's working in email and text and direct mail, and what's working in selling directly to your existing patients. Excuse me. And then finally, we talked about this new marketing pitfall that has come up. I was aware of it, but I had to see it somewhere first. And then once I got onto it, I was like, oh, this is happening in private practice. So the pitfall is this idea that I don't need to market today if we have a waiting list. So I only market when I need new patients, is another way to say that. And I just want to share, this is devastating. And so you might not be able to see it right away in marketing. So let's go to another area of your practice. Do you need to hire today? If the answer is yes, and I was just on with an owner, said somebody just handed in their 6-week notice, they're moving out of the area. This just happened to me twice last week to our practice. So very familiar with it. And I said to the owner, well, do you have a list of any student you've ever had, of any DPT who's ever applied for you? Do you keep a list going? Or maybe somebody who worked for you in the past and then no longer work for you. Do you have a list of DPTs that you can go to and communicate with? And he said, no, but that's a good idea. And then I said, well, the next step is, once you get the list, you need to communicate with it routinely. And other owners on the call were sharing, what they would do. Some were quarterly, reach out. I know 2 of my mentors used to do this really well. They would keep a long list of any student, any employee they ever had, any applicant, and they would be reaching out to that list routinely for years, right? And they would keep that list warm, right? So even though they weren't hiring today, they were still marketing to a degree. They were still communicating with their list of future hires, right? Potential hires. We should be doing the same exact thing with our patient marketing, right? Just because you don't need new patients today doesn't mean you can't deliver tremendous amounts of goodwill through your marketing channels, through your email, through your social media, through your text campaigns, through your direct mail, or however you're communicating with your patient list. You never want to turn that off. Why? Because one day you're going to need new patients. And what you want to be able to do is that list that is now very warm, you want to be able to reach out with them with a simple offer and have an influx of people coming in, so that you're no longer not busy, underutilized. Make sense? Right? So think about that. If you find yourself making desperate hires at times for clinicians because your Indeed ad isn't working, or your LinkedIn isn't working, there's a huge shortfall of DPTs as it is, licensed DPTs that are working in our industry. Now's not the time. It's a little late to start, reaching out to people, asking if they want a job. You should be keeping them warm over time. And, our owners are awesome. They're sharing things that are working. So some of the ideas were, invite them to a continuing education course you're holding. If you're doing we'll call it an entertainment event, you're going to a sporting event, like a local baseball game, basketball game, soccer match, whatever it is, invite those DPTs on your list along to whatever it is that you're doing. If you're doing a company 5K, invite DPTs that aren't on your list to run with you, right? It's the same thing with our patients. We, again, might not need new patients today. We might have a waiting list. The last thing on our mind is marketing. However, in the future, what we're doing today is building future pipeline for the future, right? So we can have a cold list where we don't touch it at all. Then all of a sudden we rush out and we start texting people and emailing people to come in, right? That's a disaster. Keep your list warm today. We talked through that, and owners were sharing how they thought about that, even if they had, I think somebody mentioned they had a 3-week wait list to get in, but they weren't going to shut their marketing off. And that's really, really smart. So anyhow, we ended up having an awesome event, breakthrough event. I don't have the next breakthrough event for you yet, but I know we'll be having one. We'll be sharing details of that in the future. I did want to get this recorded to you and presented because I think there are some valuable insights that you might have for what is happening within the industry and how you can think about mitigating that, navigating this here in 2026. As always, appreciate everything that you're doing within private practice. I'll see you in the next episode.